Kia ora koutou, ko te mea tuatahi e mihi ana maua ki te tangata whenua o Aotearoa, me ka mihi maua ki a koutou. Ko ngā tauira maua ki o tākou whakaihu waka, te whare wanaka o tākou. Ko Alice Bates tōku ingoa, rawa ko Claire Hamilton tōna ingoa. Ināia nei he whakatauki mō tō maua kaupapa. Whaia te mātauranga hei oranga mō koutou. Engari, he aha te kaupapa mō tēnei kōrero, he ako tāwhiti ngā reo o ngā tauira. So kia ora everyone, we are Alice and Claire, distance students from o tākou whakaihu waka, the University of Otago, and we are here to talk to the kaupapa of distance learning from the student's perspective. So the whakatauki I outlined sets the intention for our kōrero, reminding us that the pursuit of learning is at the heart of well-being for all of us. As Jojo alluded to, both Claire and I have studied via distance education at both undergrad and postgraduate level through a number of institutions in Aotearoa and overseas. We have chosen distance learning for different reasons at different times, but our primary reasons have been the need to balance study with work and also the ability to access courses not offered locally. Between us, we've studied at the University of Canterbury, Thompson Rivers University in Canada, Open Polytechnic, Te Whare Wānanga o Aotearoa, and of course, Otago. So our discussion today is a reflection on all of these experiences, and we will mostly be reflecting on courses that have been offered by dual delivery, so some online students, some on-campus students. We're going to speak to three key areas, student experience, technology, and course design, offering our perspective particularly on what we have found works well. So I'll hand over to Claire to have a chat to us about the student experience.
Kia ora, thanks for the introduction, Alice. Yeah, so I'll start by talking a little bit about our experiences as distance students more broadly being part of tertiary institutions. We've found that the learning experience is so much more than what happens in the classroom, or in our case, the virtual classroom. So for us, it's so important to feel like we're kind of part of a wider cohort, part of the institution, and we get those opportunities for whanaungatanga. This is kind of accepted wisdom for on-campus studying. And students get so many experience beyond the classroom on campus, but studying by distance can be quite an isolating experience unless those opportunities for connection are offered. So something that we found really helpful is when courses connect us to other distance students at the beginning of a program. This can be as simple as an email asking if we consent to having our contact details shared, or by offering virtual or face-to-face meetups. So for our current program of study, we have a distance student Facebook group, which we rely on a lot. And another thing that our program offered is a noho marae at the beginning of the course, as well as in-person workshops throughout. That's actually part of our course requirements. So that might not apply for all programs, but for us, those opportunities to meet our classmates and our lecturers and put faces to names were really useful for our engagement in the learning. Also important is being intentional in connecting distance students to the wider resources that are available to us as members of the tertiary institution. So that might include counseling, course advice, academic support, that sort of thing. Sometimes as a distance student, it's really not clear who you can go to if you need help or support. And if support isn't easily accessible and it's really clear how you can get it, it can sometimes be easier just to disengage from the learning. Part of this includes lecturers being accessible online, so being responsive to emails or preferably having online office hours. We found that we miss out on those opportunities to connect with lecturers where an on-campus student might be able to kind of catch them at the beginning of class to ask about feedback on an assignment or to ask about lecture content. For distance students, those opportunities need to be intentionally offered and really easily accessible. For Alice and I, we both work. So what works really well is when lecturers have online office hours around lunchtime so that we can pop in on our work breaks and ask any questions that we need. And then a tip from us is that if the courses are dual delivery, consider having both a distance class rep as well as an on-campus class rep. It really helps having a class rep who's in the same boat as you. So for us, the best papers are when we've been connected to the other students. We maybe have a group chat, and our distance class rep is in the group chat, and we can message the group and say things like, oh, is it just me who doesn't have sound for the lecture this week? Or is it just me where the lecturer seems to be cutting off 20 minutes in? And then the rep can go and relay that to the lecturer, and that saves us so much time and frustration. And then the final point on this slide speaks to the fact that distance students are often part-time students. We're juggling work, we're juggling family commitments. We need a lot of notice of extra classes or workshop or any changes to schedule. And the communication around schedules needs to be very clear and upfront. Like you can't really communicate, you can't over communicate when it comes to distance students. That seems like a pretty basic tip, but we found throughout our studies that it's not always the case. So just being aware of that. That goes for in-person workshops, especially if we need to travel, but with online schedules as well. And now I'll hand it back to Alice to talk about our experiences with technology.
Thanks, Claire. So we have already heard some great points around this today, with obviously technology being a really critical component of delivering distance education. So we have both experienced the use of technology across different courses where there has been varying levels of success. One paper that I took last year had a system where the lectures were recorded for distance students from the actual lecture theatre, and every week, without fail, at 42 minutes and 20 seconds, the video and audio would just go silent and buzz for the next 15 minutes. And it was really frustrating because over a semester's worth of work, it actually added up to hours of content that we just didn't have access to. We have both had significantly better experiences of online lectures when they've been held in specific AV rooms rather than general lecture theatres. And while that is not always possible, it may be an option open to some courses, and if not, other considerations are needed. So, for example, if there's an opportunity for the lecturer to answer questions with the on-campus students, they can be asked to speak into the microphone. So within our current cohort of distance students that we are both part of, the inability to hear question time has been the main frustration for us and our classmates, because all we can hear is a disjointed discussion that doesn't make sense. So this was another paper again last year. 50% of students studied in the online stream, which meant that half of the class was missing out on question time. That caused a lot of angst and discontent amongst the students, and we think it could have been pretty easily solved. Just as a side note, we have given feedback to the appropriate person on that issue, people on that issue. So one thing we have found helpful is when lecturers post links to videos and other online content separately to the PowerPoint or lecture recording. There seems to be problems sometimes when those files are embedded in the lecture recording and then uploaded to the learning management systems like Blackboard or Moodle or whatever you use. Just a really simple tip, but yeah, again, has quite big implications for our learning. So the papers that cater specifically to online learning, like those that we've studied through the Open Polytechnic, shout out to you, Nathan, and Te Whare Wānanga o Aotearoa, generally had like a much better grasp of providing distance learning. And although that's not surprising, the thing that made these providers stand out in our experience was primarily the smooth use of technology. So these organisations utilised really clear signposting in the learning management systems that guided us through the study without feeling like we were missing out. And they also really purposefully used a whole range of online tools to support the learning: videos, quizzes, pre-recorded lectures, activities, games, the whole realm. I think it was in the first presentation, there was another tool mentioned that I'd totally forgotten about, but Padlet maybe? Someone will be able to remind me. And yeah, those kinds of things are just really help with our engagement. That's me. I'm going to pass back to Claire for our final section.
Great. So obviously we're not experts in course design, and we've heard lots about course design today, so I'm going to keep this short. But the main consideration that we've put up there on the slide is, do distance students have equitable access to course material and learning opportunities compared to on-campus students? So sometimes, as distance students in these dual delivery programs, we've ended up feeling like an afterthought in course design. So it feels like the course is set up for on-campus students, and then a few adjustments have been made to make it work for online learners. So going back to what Alice was talking about hearing class questions and class discussions, we've had so many issues with this. We can think of lectures where we've missed up to 2 hours out of a 3-hour lecture because the lecture was designed with course discussion in mind. So even if the technology is working exactly as it should and we can hear the discussion, it's not the same as participating, especially if it's, a breakout group discussions. It's impossible to translate that through technology, and we often have to sort of fast forward or sit through the murmurs of small group discussion. And what we found is that usually for these lectures, it's adapted to distance students by asking us to write on an online discussion board afterwards. Sometimes the topics are completely different to the on-campus class discussion topics. And we found, I'm sure that this is a common experience, that the discussion board rarely results in the same quality of discussion as in-person discussions do. And this is especially true if the discussion boards aren't being actively monitored and frequently responded to by lecturers and tutors. So the consideration here is, how do we get that sort of same feedback from lecturers for our learning? Teaching can be quite off the cuff and impromptu when it's in person. Which is at times great. Alice and I have both had the experience of listening to an online lecture where the lecturer, where there's no video, and so we're listening, the lecturer is drawing some sort of complex diagram on the board to demonstrate a point that they've made, and we're sat there with our headphones on just trying to imagine what they might be drawing. So that's really valuable learning, and it's not that that shouldn't happen, but the question needs to be, how is the lecturer then capturing those sorts of things and disseminating it to distance students so that we have equitable access of the learning materials? So some things that have worked really well for us in the past is when courses are able to have a few Zoom lectures, even just once or twice a semester, so that we have the opportunity to attend class in real time and participate in the discussions and ask our questions. Similarly, having online Zoom tutorials that are specifically catered to distance students is incredibly helpful. And again, just gives us that chance to have that real-time feedback. And then if neither of those options are available, consider having live watching options for the lecture recording with video capabilities so that we can see the lecture, we can see the board, and we can engage with it that way. Yeah, so that's been a quick overview of our experiences from the course design perspective. So I'll just hand it back to Alice, who will close us off.
Yes, so just to summarize our discussion today, we just think these 3 areas are particularly important to consider when ensuring a positive experience of distance learning. Student experience requires a balance between connecting distance students to the wider cohort, particularly if a paper is offered both in person and online, as well as catering specifically for the differing needs of distance students. Technology use needs to be purposeful and thought out so that distance students receive quality course delivery. And course design requires careful consideration, particularly when a course is delivered via both modes, so that there is equitable access to learning and resources for all student groups. Now, I know we will have an opportunity for questions later on, but there has been a question from Fleur in the chat. Alice and Claire, what do you think about asynchronous tasks for equivalent experience if it is facilitated? Fleur, could you just tell us a little bit more about that, and we might see if we can answer that one now?
Sorry, yeah, that was jargony up the wazoo, wasn't it? So if you're not in just a forum and you're using something like a community board, it's in your own time, but there's teacher presence and it's scheduled into their facilitation. Are you keen on that so you can work and still be engaged? This is what we're trying to design for and think about at Massey, equivalent but not identical. Just wondering, what you think.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. We would love more kind of options like that, where there's still the real benefits of flexibility, but we feel like we're getting the same experiences to ask questions and learn from each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't think there's any other questions at the moment in the chat. So feel free to send us an email to our Otago addresses on the slide or find us on LinkedIn if you have any further questions after today. We're both very happy to lend a hand to further discussions. And yeah, this is an area we're quite passionate about. So thank you for having us and tēnā koutou katoa.